Good evening, everyone. Looks like we've got about 36 people online here tonight. Uh, Still maybe a few joining us. But, wish to welcome you to our latest session of Township Tuesday. Tonight we're going to go over a little bit of how to run meetings and the duties of officers. And I see we have Tom Moe is with us here somewhere.
Hey, there we go. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Tom.
Good deal. Good deal.
Did you want to start off on how to
No.
organize a meeting?
I don't want to start off, but you had some slides, I think, did you not?
Uh, well, I just have some pages of the duties of officers. And
Why don't you put those up first, and then we can work off of those maybe.
okay, well, we'll start off with the clerk.
Because that's while you find it, because that's kind of what started this was we had some inquiries about new officers and what we're supposed to do and that type of question, wasn't it? Wasn't that kind of what got this going? Sorry.
That's right.
Yeah. So I don't know if we got some new officers out there or not, but if so, then this is kind of a township 101, I guess, for you. But so we'll just go through a few things and then hopefully open up for you have some questions. So go ahead, Larry. Township clerk, I see. Why don't you just run through those paragraphs? Just kind of the headings. Just walk through them pretty quickly. You don't have to read the actual thing, but just walk through the headings and so we can all see what we're talking about here.
Well, this is chapter 58-07. And that is found on page 188 of the 2024 version of the handbook. It starts off with the compensation of the clerk, and they can be paid up to $100 per day, not to exceed $4,000 in a calendar year. And if the duties of the clerk are combined with the township, that person is only entitled to one pay, the same pay as a single officer.
Combined with the treasurer, I think you meant to say.
Oh, yeah, right. Combined with the treasurer.
And before we go to the next one, that compensation rate is common for all officers, that $100 maximum per day. And you should have a daily rate and because the law provides for a daily rate. I know a lot of towns would say, well, we'll pay you $300 a year, $750 a year. I mean, that's pretty common, but technically you should have a daily rate, which is approved at the annual meeting. And then, so the idea is that you keep track of your time and what constitutes a day. And so, if you're gonna charge $800, if everybody gets $800, you're saying, okay, at $100 a day, that's 8 days. At $50 a day, that's 16 days, and you can do the math. So that's what you should have in your annual meeting minutes is what's our daily rate, and then go from there.
Okay, the next is 58-07-02. The clerk may appoint a deputy. The elected clerk must be a resident of the township. But the clerk can appoint a deputy that does not have to be a resident of the township, but you have to have a resident that has to sign off on all the forms, the official forms and things for the township. The deputy clerk can do the bulk of the work. Okay, then 58-07-03, duties of the township clerk. Clerk, of course, acts as the clerk of the township supervisors board and keeps the record of all its proceedings. And has to take care of all the official documents of the township and enter the minutes of all meetings and to file and preserve all accounts audited by the township board. File a township clerk's bond in the office of the county auditor, and the township clerk's oath and oath of the deputy clerk if one is appointed in the office of the clerk of the district court. The clerk of the district court is going to wonder why you're doing that. But that's what the law says. Okay, preserve and record the annual statement of the treasurer. Require all legally elected officers to qualify within the time prescribed by law. In other words, they have to sign an oath before they actually take on the duties of their office. Make a record of all statements of the remittances of any township funds from the county treasurer. Keep an account of the township funds in the same manner as is required of the township treasurer, and to perform all duties imposed upon the township clerk under the laws of this state relating to the forming of jury panels. There's a penalty for neglect. And one interesting thing here is 58-07-05, destruction of township records. This is a very common question we get. What do we do with all the old records? It's the last part of the duties of the clerk, destruction of township records. You can get rid of election poll books after they're 10 years old, election registration books, petitions of candidates, all election forms, blanks, books, and records of every kind and description except abstracts of votes, assessment slips, Township Board of Equalization records, claims vouchers which have been audited and paid, certificates of official bonds, and insurance policies which have become obsolete. Those can be disposed of.
Let me jump in here, Larry, before you turn pages. A couple questions back on the bond. Where do we get a bond? Up in was that number maybe up in the very first paragraph, I think. Should run up to the top of that page. Where was that bond? The we're gonna get a bond. File a township clerk's bond in the office of the county. Number 5. Where do we get a bond?
Well, you get a bond from the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, handles the state bonding fund. And we've got the information for that on our website, ndtua.com.
What's the cost for that?
There is no cost for it, other
Yeah.
than the time it takes to apply for it.
Very important for clerks and treasurers to have bonds because you're handling funds, you're handling public funds. And, you know, and we're not necessarily saying that you're going to do anything untoward. You're not going to take the money and run to Mexico with it. We're not saying that, but, you know, things can happen. You can, you know, have a fire in your house. You carrying some appearance of books and papers in your car, and you lose some money that way, so that's what the bond will do. Sometimes it's, you can accidentally have problems with the handling of money. So that's why it's real important for both clerks and treasurers to have bond, and it's a pretty good deal. You can get a bond for nothing. You just gotta apply for it through the insurance reserve fund. And then run down to the bottom of the page, the destruction of records. As Larry said, we get this question a lot, and this is the 10-year list here. And so a couple things you'll notice, it says after we've been first offering to the state archivist. So before you throw records, you're supposed to notify the state archivist, who's at the Secretary of State's office. And they're in theory, they're supposed to look at your records, see if there's anything of historical value. Did you have a check issued to President Teddy Roosevelt or something like that? They want to look at that kind of stuff. So in theory, that's what you're supposed to do. I suspect a lot of townships don't. But probably the biggest thing about that 580705, there's 9 things there that after 10 years you can chuck them. Notice what isn't on that list. Township meeting minutes is not on that list. Any copies of easements or deeds, anything like that's not on that list. Why is that? Because you got to save that stuff forever. So that stuff should not get thrown, obviously. Every township, it probably has at least 100 years worth of minutes. Some townships in the eastern part of the state, we came into effect in statehood 1889, so that's 40 years of history. So you really should, in theory, you should have minutes from back in the 1889 national annual meeting. So don't be throwing that stuff away. So
Actually, some of them up in Pembina County could have minutes from back in territorial days.
And here's where I can make a snide remark and say, and Roger probably took the notes because he's on the line tonight. So, and I know he's the clerk of township. So sorry about that, Roger, but I couldn't resist.
Well, if he looks way back in his book, he might find them back there.
Yeah, but I just can't tell you how many times I get calls from township officers, and they're looking for something in the past, and I said, well, you got to go look at the minutes, and they don't know where they're at, or they can't find them, or they got destroyed, and there's a lot of things in those minutes that could really be helpful, especially when it comes to maybe easements or why did we jog a road around a slough? Why did we do that? And there might be something in those old minutes, and so that's why it's real important to save that stuff. So. Maybe you can. There you go. So that was it on that page for me, Larry. I don't know if anybody else got any questions. But.
Okay, the Board of Supervisors. Chapter 58-06. Which is on page 187 of the 2024 version. Basically, they are the board of directors for the township, and all their many powers are listed here.
You got that page? You got that page handy? Or at least I'm not seeing it.
You're not seeing it?
No, I'm still looking at the clerk stuff here.
Okay.
It is what it is.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, well, basically this is the powers of that the township board acts upon things between annual meetings. There are things that are reserved to the entire township, the electors of the township. Those things that are not listed on this page are reserved for the electors of the township. There was a question that came up lately about uh, hiring a lawyer and beginning legal proceedings. And that is not something that the board can do on its own. It has to, it does take a vote of the electors of the township to pursue that. And again, the compensation of supervisors is the same as the clerk, up to $100 per day, not exceeding $4,000. And the Board of Township Supervisors may adjourn from time to time, and in cases of emergency may hold special meetings on call of the township clerk. And the only notice that a Board of Supervisors needs to give for their meetings is to notify the county auditor in a timely fashion. And if anyone has requested notice, that you also have to notify those individuals.
You ready for a question on that?
Sure.
If the board decides, the supervisors decide to pay the bills at the end in December, including their wages, isn't that a special meeting that has to be, and any and all of the bills for the year, isn't that a special meeting that has to be advertised?
Well, Floyd, let me, I can jump in on that. You know, there's, you know, there again, the term special meeting is a meeting of the people.
Yeah.
And not of the, well, not of the board. Okay.
Right.
No, we don't have, we have special meetings, but that's kind of a misnomer here because the board can meet basically anytime it wants to
Right.
with proper notice. Okay. And so that meeting you're talking about in December, whose meeting? Is that a meeting of the people, the residents, or is that a meeting of the board? So if it's a meeting of the board, that does not require a newspaper notice. Maybe as a side question is, why in the hell are you waiting until December to pay your bills for? It should be, that should be ongoing, but that's another matter. And I guess if you want to make your payment to your supervisors at the end of the year, end of the calendar year, I guess you could do that. I think I would want to have a resolution at the annual meeting in March that says, okay, supervisors, you can pay yourself at the daily rate in December, so you've got authorization at your annual meeting. That's the way I would do that. But if it's a meeting of the board of supervisors, it does not require newspaper notice.
Okay, the reason I brought it up is because they pay all of the bills, but if I did some blading for them and I did some spraying for them, I wasn't notified of the meeting. So then they didn't put it in the paper. How am I supposed to know? So I never got paid.
So,
They said,
well,
if I didn't get
but
paid, they weren't going to pay it.
yeah, but if you're at, you're talking about you're doing the work as an officer or as an
No, as a
outside vendor,
contractor.
outside vendor.
Yeah.
Well, but just because you don't show up at a meeting, you don't necessarily mean you don't get paid. You send in a bill like any other vendor,
Yeah.
The necessity to attend a meeting to get paid. There's a lot of people who wouldn't get paid because there's a lot of people that never go to meetings, to get paid. They just send their bill in. So, Now, if you're talking on here again as a side note, if you're talking about the officers doing that work, that's a little bit of a different animal there, of course, but
Yeah.
because there's some rules on that, but um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why notice to a vendor, to a contractor would, other than a courtesy, we're gonna get together and pay you if you want to come to the meeting. I don't think there would be a requirement for getting paid. It shouldn't be, I wouldn't think, unless you had a question about the bill, obviously. Then obviously you'd want to talk eye to eye and say what's going on here if you want to discuss the itemization of the bill. I don't know if that's going on there, but
Okay, we always used to pay the supervisors and everything, and anybody that had any bill for mowing or rock removal or anything that they did for the township with their township's approval was always on at the annual meeting. Because they knew when to show up, so they could be there if anybody had a question about their bill. Otherwise,
so
you
that
turn a bill in and they say, no, he didn't do it right, we're not gonna pay him.
so
So,
that would be in March, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, if I did work for you in June or July, and I'm not going to get paid till 8, 9, 10 months later in March, and if that's the time you're going to gripe about me, I think you and I are going to have a problem. 'Cause
mhm,
I think you better tell me we got a problem with my work in June or July.
right,
Just like just like if you got somebody hired to come and fix your house, you're not going to wait 9 months before you get after them. So this shouldn't be any different, I don't think. But the basis of your question there, Floyd, would be, really no newspaper notice required if it's a meeting of the supervisors.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Larry, back as long as we stopped, I want you back up to that list of 16 or 18, that 01 there again. So there's 19 listed duties of the supervisor. If you are a new supervisor, obviously you want to go to this section 580601, and you want to look at those 19. That's what your duties are. There it is. Because we always get a question, what's my duties? Well, there they are, right there. And as a good example, if you take a look at number 19, the very last one, to submit a budget for the township. Notice it doesn't say approve the budget, because only the electors do that at their annual meeting. The supervisors recommend and submit the budget, but the electors actually do the approval of that in their list of responsibilities in the annual meeting. So like you say, if it's not on that list, you don't do it.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
When we have the annual meeting, we have the supervisors, we have all the officers, and we have members of the community. Are all those people equals as far as making motions for actions and voting on motions and all that? Are we all there as equals?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a meeting of the residents. Absolutely. And
Okay.
and that's what's unique about township government, is that we're the only unit of government where the people get to come together and have a meeting and actually vote and like you say, make the motions and do all those kind of things. Sure.
But
Uh,
if it's somebody from outside the township, they can participate or they can be there, but they're not allowed to vote. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. The only people that can vote at the annual meeting of the township are residents. Only residents
Okay.
can vote, but it's a public meeting, so anybody can show up and of course, if the chair of the meeting, who by the way doesn't have to be the chairman of the board, because we're supposed to elect a moderator who could be Joe Citizen out in the crowd there, and so whoever's running the meeting has the power of the gavel. And of course, if you want to have public comment, you allow, that would be the time when say you have as an absentee landowner that would want to visit, would want to talk. Well, then the chair would recognize him and allow him to talk at a public comment type of thing. But Shirley can't vote on an issue because they don't live there, but Shirley can be there. Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you.
But along those, one more thought on that, we always say the township supervisors, they take their supervisor hat off one day a year on the annual meeting, because then we put our resident hat on, so the supervisors are administering the township for the 364 days And on this 365th day, we put our resident hat on the annual meeting day, and we're just like everybody else. Yeah, absolutely.
Point of interest,
Sure.
Tom, when you have, if you're around again next year for the workshop, be sure you say that. Cause when I was on the board, I went to different townships. And them township, the head one is up there. He's got his supervisor and vice chairman that, and they're in charge. And they don't realize that that day there's a moderator, a clerk, or someone to take the notes, 3 judges, and they're all residents.
Yep.
Be
And
sure you
and-
emphasize that to them.
and of course, I have said this before, Floyd, a few times. So, but you're right. You're right. It just need, and of course, the point of this is that we're talking about potential new officers out here. But I think the officers have been around the block. They can maybe learn some things as well
Yeah.
on how to do stuff.
Okay.
Okay, if we go down page of ways, we come to 58-06-06, quorum of the board. 2 supervisors constitute a quorum for the performance of duties of the Board of Township Supervisors, except when otherwise provided by law. That's very important that if 2 of you get together out looking at a washed out culvert on the side of the road, you're a quorum of the board. It falls under the open meetings law. We are getting that changed, but it hasn't taken effect yet. If somebody has a problem with the township, they might report you to the Attorney General, and you could end up taking corrective action for that sin.
What's the status of that proposed change? Where are we at on that, Larry, with the legislature right now? Is it?
Well, that's that bill is the bill was amended in the Senate. It was a House bill that got amended in the Senate, and it is now has been returned to the House amended. Now the House has to approve that amendment.
So assuming that thing gets passed, the idea is that if township supervisors are gathering as staff, we say, in other words,
Right.
say we're going to go out and we're going to fix a stop sign that fell down. That's what you normally would hire if you were the county, you'd send your guys out there to do that. Well, of course, townships, we don't have guys to go to, that's us. So we're gonna go out and put that stop sign back up. That would not be a meeting under this proposed new law, assuming it gets passed. So, but if the 2 of you are getting together and we're talking about whether we should pay a bill or not, now that's a meeting of you as an administrator, and that's going to require the notice. So it's we're gonna have to be careful how we play with this, but and that'll be obviously a big topic for the workshop next year if this bill gets passed, and I think it will. But there's a little bit of a help here for township officers when we go out and do, for lack of a better term, some physical work out on the road. You're not acting as an administrator at that point in time, so maybe we can get by without being in an illegal meeting. So we'll watch and see what happens with that one.
Right,
Now,
that's only. Go ahead.
I presume that where it says that 2 of the supervisors constitute a quorum applies to a 3-person board of supervisors, but it's 3 for a board of 5. I'm surprised it's not listed like that.
Well, I
Well, I
suppose
guess they
this
hadn't updated that since it became possible to have a 5-man board.
no.
Some
This
very
is
old language here.
Old language, and of course we were able to go to 5 supervisors, what, 10 years ago, maybe? Probably. This is one of the ones we just haven't got a chance to fix. So
Of course, in the case of a couple of officers, even of a 5-man board meeting out on the road, that would constitute a committee of the board, which is also open, is still liable to the open meetings law. And even if you were to notify the county auditor that you were having this on-site inspection, would you have the agenda attached to the door of your pickup? And if you don't have that on there, you'd still be in violation of the open meetings law. Okay,
Larry,
yes, go ahead, Sue.
so you're saying that if two supervisors can't go out together to inspect culverts? Are they functioning as staff
Well,
there, or is they functioning as
That's
supervisors?
the bill will change it so that the board can go out and do on-site inspections.
Okay,
Whether that's to go out and tour all the roads to see where they need to put gravel, or go out and look at a washed out culvert.
so inspections as well as physical labor work.
Right.
Okay, got it.
It actually, the bill says on-site inspections.
Perfect. Okay,
So you don't have to have a shovel in your hand to qualify.
thank you.
Larry, I have a
Okay.
question. Are
Yes.
supervisors allowed to discuss ongoing issues through text messages?
That would fall under open records.
So we
To
would keep
to
those open
officers,
records?
excuse me,
We would just have to keep those records, or how does that work?
right, you would have to keep those records. A copy of them should be submitted to the clerk.
Okay. Thank you.
Moral of the story, though, don't text. Don't
Okay.
text,
Right.
don't text with official business. Because it's subject to be open records, it's subject to subpoena. You know, just don't do it. Nothing is that important that you have to text. I can guarantee it. And if it's an emergency, you got somebody out, you got a school bus laying on its side and you got some kids in trouble. We're not too concerned about how you communicate. You want to text, whatever you want to do that, but normal garden variety stuff, don't text. It's a problem waiting to happen.
Right. So if a road was brought to someone's attention and they decided to let the board know, like, this was brought up to us, that's something that should just wait for the meeting.
Well, I mean,
Right.
if the member of the public says, say, text Chelsea and says, say, can you, there's a road problem out here in section 5, text you that. Well, that puts you on notice, but then of course, you're gonna text the rest of your supervisors, hey, we better go out and take a look at that. Okay. Well, that's probably the extent of a text, because basically all you're doing is you got notified of a problem and you're saying, let's go look. But now we got a meeting problem. Okay. So we probably better do a notice. And then from that point on, let's not be talking about how much money we're going to spend on this culvert in a text chain. Just don't
Okay.
do it. Just don't do that. It's just a problem.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
Yep.
Okay, if we
Hey, Larry,
go down, yes.
it's Mary. Larry or Tom, I'm wondering, I've been confused by 3-03 about regular meetings. I know it says shall hold regular meetings, but it gives specific days. Does that mean that we're meeting on the wrong days? And because we meet on Wednesdays.
Well, this here again, this is the original meeting schedule. Township boards met second, third, fourth Tuesday in March, and that Monday in June, and that was it. And that's why we went for months and months and months without getting bills paid. And you'll notice, if you notice that the second Tuesday and the fourth Tuesday can be held on the same day, you know, so really the township boards of old were meeting probably twice a year. That's all they were meeting. And it all centered around annual meeting day. And and of course you're a perfect straight lady here, Mary, because we've been preaching out on the stump for years. Have monthly meetings, you know, have other meetings that you can get. This is what the law requires. And it's, you know, it's old law here, but nothing says you can meet every day if you want, you know. And so you say you meet Wednesdays. Are you meeting monthly or weekly? What are you doing out there in Hay Creek?
Every month.
Every month. Yeah, that's I think that's a good plan, because there's stuff coming up every month. That way maybe some of the stuff that we're doing, we can wait till our monthly meeting. You know, we can wait to talk about it then. And the idea about a monthly meeting is that now we've got notice done. We'll notify the auditor once a year. Here's our meeting schedule, and you're done with notification issues. So, yeah, I really promote monthly meetings, especially in the summertime. You know, because that's when a lot of the action happens. You know, but and I know some townships meeting quarterly, but the idea of meeting twice a year, it's not 1947 anymore. It isn't, you know. So it's time to meet more regularly. I'm glad to hear that and of course in your township, Mary, you know, you got some issues out there, and you got some people out there. So I'm sure and you're a five supervisor township as well, aren't you?
No, we just have 3.
Okay. But anyway, that's, you know, it's but even our smaller townships, I think it's important to meet on a more regular basis, because there's always stuff coming up. So
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Just don't
as
want to go to jail.
yeah,
going down the list a little further, we come to 58-06-09 to audit accounts. That's one of the very important role of the supervisors. They are the board of audit for the township. They're supposed to go over all the books and prove the books and see to it that the proper reports are done on that. I can find that here.
I think that's one area where we have a lot of questions on, and especially if we have townships that have in the past had some questionable treasures that they're not sure of, but it should still fall on the shoulders of the board that you should still be doing an audit of that township, and make sure that you're also not only just doing the audit that comes annually with all your paperwork and that you have to sign off of when you do that audit, but make sure that you go through the checkbook as well and double check and make sure where those checks are sent to and who they're written to, and to be sure that you as a board authorize the payment of those checks.
You know, this is the form that the supervisors, the board of audit, have to sign down here on those orange lines. And there's blanks up here for the amount of money and the name of the treasurer and all that. So the
And my-
supervisors are ultimately responsible for that.
And my guess is, if Lloyd's still on the line, I imagine this is probably why his township got together at the end of the year, because they were doing this form. And I think my problem maybe with what he was talking about is that they were also waiting till then to pay the bills. You know, the bills would have been paid ongoing throughout the course of the year there, but there's the form that needs to, and as Larry says, the supervisors are signing off on it. So means you've looked at the books and you approve it. You approve what's going on.
If we have new supervisors out there, that form comes in the packet at the end of the year, and that'll come to either your clerk treasurer or the combination if you have them together. So if you are wondering where that paperwork comes from, well, that's where you'll get that. They receive that from the auditor's office to be filled out before. So they send all their paperwork in after your annual meeting. But that's one item that should always be watched is your accounts of your township, and make sure that you're well aware of what's being written and the checks that are being written, and that you are approving all checks that have been written. So.
And it is also generated by the ATLR for those that are using it.
Yes, absolutely. And that is one thing that if you do have that ATLR program and you are meeting once a month, there's a printout that Julie runs off for our township here, and it explains everything monthly that we do spend, and monies that are taken in. So really a good program. If you're not using it, it'd certainly be something to look into. But good benefit for the townships to have that.
For the new people, Lee, ATLR stands for what?
Annual Township Ledger Report. It is the same paperwork, that you get from the auditor's office. It is a computer program that runs that. You enter it into your computer, and at the end of the year, you're able to print it off and sign it and deliver that to your auditor. When we've talked to auditors now that from counties that have gone to it, that have switched to the ATLR program, they are very happy with it. They said one thing is it's legible so that they can read it, and the math is correct. So it does really save them a lot of time, because everything is correct on it as long as all entries are made by the townships.
I have not used ATLR for our small township because we don't have a township computer. And this is what Mr. Moe was talking about. The text messages could be subpoenaed. I don't want to have any I'm a clerk treasurer. I don't want to have any financial information related to the township on my computer for that very reason. So I just do it by hand.
And we recommend that anytime we're out and discussing the ATLR program, that is one thing that we strongly stress, is that the township should really have its own computer, for that reason, that you do not want any personal information on that computer. If by chance you get to the point where you decide that, or the clerk treasurer decides that they no longer want to be involved in the township, they can just hand the computer over. All that information is not on there private. And if you were ever questioned on anything, they then at that point, they could, if someone chose to come in and wanted your information, it would be all on just a township computer instead of your personal. So your personal information wouldn't be involved in that. But as far as the cost of it, it's normally always has to be purchased by the county, or that's how the price of it is factored, is by how many townships are in your county. So that is, for one township out of a county to purchase it, you can't. It wouldn't financially be feasible. And that's how it normally breaks up. He charges, I think it was $60 a township is what it is. The writer of that program does have to bill out for the entire number of townships in that county. So
Yeah, I just do it with I've got a bound logbook and it's all handwritten. And if there's ever any question, people can inspect the logbook.
And point well taken about the you know, personal computer use, and you know, and I think it's prudent to think about maybe, you know, have a township have a township computer laptop, and it doesn't have to be a laptop or a computer that does a lot of does a lot of capability. And I imagine I imagine you can probably get one for probably less money than what you think at this point in time. And and my guess is there's probably even some of those computer sellers even have some sort of discount for governmental bodies. I suspect, you never know, but you could probably get into a decent laptop for not too much money, and it might be money well spent, especially in this day and age, and you know, and especially if you're going to be, you know, sending out some notices or letters, or you know, you could use that laptop that computer to type a meeting notice or something, you know, and that might be it. You might be find yourself you'd use it more than you think, but I appreciate you know, there's a cost factor, but it may not be as high as you think.
Question for you. If the
Yeah, go.
if the township buys a computer and you have a secretary and a clerk, who should have the computer?
Well, that's up to you. I mean, you would decide that, you know, so.
Okay.
So then the only thing I would say, you know, you don't need to have some secret rocket science passwords. I, you know, it's a public computer. So, I mean, I wouldn't have as long as the thing is secure, you probably have the password sitting right on the machine itself, you know, but I wouldn't have any difficult passwords, but yeah, you'd have to decide who's got it, you know, and
Okay.
no doubt it'd be the clerk, you know, would have it, but maybe the treasurer should have it. I don't know. So. Also, before you go into the treasurer's there, Larry, I saw a question on signing checks. Roger, if you're still on, I think we need at least two people, right? Two people, isn't that
Well, both Century Code and North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund require at least two signatures.
and doesn't matter who the two are?
Chairman and the treasurer. Actually, Century Code says chairman, clerk, and treasurer.
Okay.
North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund with the bonding fund requires at least two. So if you have a bond and something goes awry in your township and you've only been signing one person signing a check, you might not be covered.
Yeah. But two people signing a check is prudent, and it is the law.
Minimum of two, yes.
So, but then you gotta be careful. You don't get into that doggone practice of, you know, you sign 3, 4, 5 checks ahead of time, and there's, you know, because I'm not gonna be around. No, that's just not good practice. You know, just not, you know. I know that happens, but
Tom,
but
what happens then when you have a bill that you have to pay with a debit card?
well, I'll give you my little editorial on debit cards. I wouldn't use them.
When I go to put a notice in the Herald now, it has to be paid with a debit card.
Can't you use a credit card?
Well, credit card, debit card, whatever.
Well, they're different, you know, they're different. So I would probably use the problem with a debit card is that takes money right out of the account.
Yeah.
And you only have a couple days to determine if, you know, if the thing's been stolen, or you only have a couple days to find the error. And whereas a credit card, you got at least 60 days to dispute and find the error. And the problem with the credit card, of course, is that if it gets stolen, but even if it gets stolen, I think you're only liable for about $50. So
yeah, but my question here is,
how
do you record two signatures?
Yeah, that's that's a good question. It's a good question, and of course you can't because you know, there again, you know, the idea of two signatures implies that we're using paper checks.
Mhm.
and we're not using plastic. And so how do you do that? And it's I suspect that I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head, or I suspect what you probably have to do is get that receipt, print it off or print it and get the other signatory to sign your receipt.
The
Okay.
Herald will allow you to send a bill. I do it through the Williston Herald online through the column.us, and they will mail a bill to your township. You don't have to pay via online. You just have to check the other box on the website.
Okay, that's in the Williston paper. Okay, well, that's good
Yep.
to know.
Well, yeah, it's all done by one big clearinghouse these
Yeah,
days.
yeah. But I think Sue's question is, but if you do use a credit card, debit card plastic, what do you do? And I guess I would want it, because you're gonna get you can get a paper receipt, or you can download, the receipt.
Mhm.
You print it off and you get your other signatory to sign that receipt. So
Okay.
that's it's going to be after the fact, but that would be
nonetheless, it's noticed. Okay,
but after the
got it.
fact, but there again, the auditing team at the end of the year, they're going to look at those they're going to look at those receipts and say, well, why isn't there not a second signature here? That would be something that the auditor your board of auditors should catch. So I don't know if anybody else got any ideas about using plastic and how you do that, but it is obviously how we do things now. But
Tom,
I would be especially cautious about using debit cards because the turnaround time on them is so short, and if it gets stolen, you just don't have much time to catch the problem.
Tom, I just wanted to tell you, we have so much activity in Hay Creek that we do electronic transfers and electronic banking quite a bit. I don't know that our treasurer uses checks. I don't know if that's something that eventually will get updated in the Century Code or in the wordage. I don't know. It's
So all your transactions are digital.
almost all.
Okay.
Um,
But you get invoices, right?
Yep, and it shows the transfers on there.
So if you get an invoice which you can print off, and then you can discuss that bill or approve pay of that bill. So you got that in your minutes,
Right.
and then okay, then we go ahead and we instruct to pay the bill, and of course that implies we're going to pay it online or digitally.
Right.
Then I suspect you probably would want to, then you'd download a receipt or some payment thing. And, so as long, the thing about, you still should be able to generate a paper trail, I think that an auditor could look at, I would think, to determine. So.
And we're lucky our treasurer is a bank officer and not at the same bank, which is good. We made sure that we have a different bank, but
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is what she does, and trains people in new banks. And I don't know if that will ever be updated, but we rarely use checks just because it is.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, but I think as long as you create the paper trail, it might be a digital paper trail, but as long as you create the paper trail that an auditor in the future, an auditor can say, okay, Hay Creek Township, the township spent $47.36 on something. What was that for? Let's see the chain, or let's see the invoice. Let's see it all. Let's see the approval of that bill. And I think if you can do that, then I think then you should be okay.
Okay. Good.
This coming from a guy that doesn't know anything about auditing, nor do I want to, but
Right.
it just makes sense to create a chain here that somebody can look at.
For sure.
We had an interesting thing on this topic in December. The bank that we used got new software, and they notified us that there would be no more verification of the two signatures on a check. That they would only look if there was one signature, that's all that they would take. And we actually had to they made us go to the bank and sign something new, a new signature card that said that they were no longer going to no longer require the two signatures. now that we've had this conversation, I think I want it back the way it was.
Well, especially with the way the law is written and especially what Roger brings up with the bonding issue and with the insurance reserve fund. So yeah, but
Because the bank said they would not do the 2 signatures anymore.
well, you can have 2 signatures. They're just not going to look at it. They're not
That's
going to look at
correct.
it. Yeah. But you can
So-
still have the state have the policy on your end that you're going to require 2 signatures on your check. So whether the bank looks at them is another matter, I guess. But at least you've got 2 signatures on your end. Larry, go ahead and get into the township treasurer duties here before we should keep going on this here. So why don't you walk through that there? So
Okay, that's what's on the screen?
yep, got it. Just looking
Okay.
at it.
Okay. Page 189 of the handbook, chapter 58-08, the township treasurer, the duties of the treasurer, disbursement of funds. The township treasurer shall receive and take charge of all monies belonging to the township. And they have to keep a record of all the warrants that have been turned in to be paid, and provide keep account of receipts and disbursements, deliver books, property, and money to their successor. It's all laid out right here on page 189. And the treasurer to make an annual statement. Township treasurer shall prepare an annual statement of receipts and disbursements for the period January 1st to December 31st of each year. The statement must include the amount, date, source, and fund credited for each receipt, and the amount, date, payee, purpose, and fund debited for each disbursement. And the statement must include the beginning and ending balances of monies held by the township. Penalty for neglect of duty, the warrant record, and all 58-08-08 township money to be deposited in township name. A township treasurer may not deposit in that person's own name monies belonging to the township in any bank, savings bank, trust company, or other fiduciary institution. All township monies must be deposited in the name of the township, and any interest on such money must be credited to the township fund. Any person violating any provision of this section is guilty of a Class A misdemeanor. So any questions on the duties of the township treasurer?
What kind of, now the treasurer, of course, needs to be bonded as well. What's the size of the bond we should have for a treasurer?
Well, as the law is right now, it's difficult to get more than $10,000. It is supposed to be equal to the greatest amount of money that the treasurer has under the control. There is a bill going through the legislature right now to redo the state bonding fund. And part of that will be improving the language that that will allow that a township can bond for the appropriate amount. If the township has a 6-figure bank balance, they'll be able to bond for 6 figures. Because the way it is right now, it's difficult to get more than $10,000.
No, we can, but we can go to a different, we can go find bonds with other companies. We have to pay for it, but we could do that, right? Yeah, so
right.
that.
This is the free bond.
Yeah. And so we forget, and we do know we've got some townships with some pretty sizable bank accounts. We do know that. And
And we've had some that We've had some that lost a sizable amount too.
Yeah, and that triggered that last paragraph there about about the criminality there. So, but we certainly can go outside the insurance reserve and go outside state bonding. We can purchase a bond from other bonding sources. It's going to cost us some money, but it might be money well spent, you know, and you know, and like I say, it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, a criminal act. It can be an accidental thing. It can be you know, you're driving home and you get stopped by somebody with a gun and they give me all your money and away you go. So that's it. There's all kinds of horror stories like that out there. So I can't emphasize enough the necessity for having some proper bonding and so and just as a word of caution, make sure that we got everybody bonded and make sure that we remember we're dealing with public funds here. So.
Okay. Well, that's the last of the prepared material that I've got to put on the screen.
Can I share a screen here, Larry, or not?
You should be able to.
Do I have one here? That's the next thing. Now, let me look at this one here. Let's see. I got for new officers out there. You can kind of figure this out there. There's two sections of the Century Code that really need to get in there. And you folks that have been around the block a little bit, you too. Title 58 of the Century Code, in which we just looked at three different sections there: supervisors, clerk, and the treasurer dealing with duties. That's where you find your duty. But Title 58 is all township stuff, and there's you know, we looked at 5801 and then there's 5802, 03, or up to 16 or 18, I think it is. So there's several 17, 18 chapters in there. So it's about 30 pages of Title 58. And so that's your Bible. And you should take a look at that and review that from time to time, because that's where your township questions, that's where we get our answers. That's where it's at. So that's the law. And so and our Century Code is the name of our state statutes. That's got that unique name, and it's always a number dash a number dash a number. So 58 dash a number dash a number. So if you notice there, the 5804 was the supervisor. So 04 then dash 1 dash 2 dash 3 dash so on and so forth. So, and the other one is roads. That's all Title 24. That's where you'll find about your duties and your responsibilities for roads. That's all in Title 24. So those two parts of the handbook are pretty important for you to take a look at. Okay. Supervisors have supervision over roads. Okay, and you'll notice that's in Title 24, where I just told you that's where you find, and there's the Century Code section that tells you this is part of your duties as supervisor. You have general supervision over the roads, highways, and bridges throughout it. The bridges is a little bit of a different animal because most bridges are the responsibility of the county. But there's the general statement. So if anybody tells you who do you think you are telling me what I can do with this township road, well, I'm a supervisor and that's my responsibility. You have general supervision. And that's the section of the Century Code that lets you do that. And of course, that term general supervision is pretty broad, but you know, your responsibility is to the traveling public, and with our section line situation, and of course, here's the section line section. Every mile open for public travel, 33 feet either side. So it's 4 rods wide, 66 feet either side of the section line, whether there's a road there or not. Okay. You could have a built up road. You could be asphalt, it could be gravel, it could be what we call a prairie trail, it could be a field trail, a field road, could be nothing there, grass. But every mile between here and the Pacific Ocean, and from the Canadian border down to Mexico, every mile there's a section line, 66-foot right of way, which is your responsibility. So when we talk about responsibilities of supervisors, you know, there's the big one right there is supervision over roads. So, I think I had another set of slides just real quick here. On meetings and notices, let's talk just briefly about that. And I think this is from what we talked about in last December annual meeting. And for those of you that are new, you know, we meet every year, annual meeting, we do some of this stuff. All meetings require notice, okay? And so that last sentence there, sometimes people get it mixed up. Public meetings are open to the public. Anybody can show up, okay? But they're not necessarily for participation by the public. I always think about it, you know, a school board meeting, for example. For those who go to school board meetings, those are public meetings. You can go there, but you don't get to vote at it. You don't get to talk unless the president of the school board or whoever's got the gavel opens up for public comment, but you can sure be there, but you can't, you know, you really can't participate unless they let you. And so every meeting in the state of a public body is open to the public, okay? And then that generates that open meeting and open record issue, okay? And our township meetings are these four. We have annual meetings, special meetings, supervisor meetings, and zoning meetings, okay? So we just talked about the supervisor meetings. That's a meeting of the 3 or the 5 of you or the quorum of you, where the public can be there to watch you work and watch and listen to you. Okay, but it's only the 3 of you that are voting at that. And you're only dealing with your responsibilities, that list of 19 things that was in your duties. That's all you're doing at that supervisor meeting. And obviously one of them is, you know, supervision of the roads. And that's where a great majority of our time at supervisor meetings is spent on road issues. The annual meeting and the special meeting, we're talking about meeting of the residents.
Where, Charlie?
Meeting of the residents, and that's when everybody gets to show up that live there.
Lay down.
So I think John, I think you got a hot mic there. So that's a meeting of all the residents, and everybody can vote at that thing. The zoning meeting is that's a whole separate deal, and that's a different kind of a meeting. Here's the problem that we've talked about. It's always the same people. Okay, so you get 3 or 4 people at the annual meeting, and they're your supervisors and your clerk. But they're, again, at the annual meeting, they're not the supervisors, they're residents on that day. And so it's a different group and a different set of responsibilities. And then we have a supervisor meeting. It's the same doggone 3 people, but now we got our supervisor hat and those different responsibilities. You always got to keep track. What meeting is this? Okay, what are we doing here? And of course, the zoning meeting, there again, it's the same 3 people again, but we're dealing with zoning issues. So I always say, if you're talking about a building permit, you don't do that at a supervisor meeting. You do that at a zoning meeting. If you're talking about graveling a road, you don't do that at a zoning meeting, you do that at a supervisor meeting, so on and so forth. You got to keep track of what meeting is this, even because it's hard because it's always the same people. The notice, of course, for the annual meeting, that's where the county newspaper thing is involved. Because it's a meeting of the residents, where the meeting of the supervisors, there's that 2nd, 4th of March. And this is where I say you probably should meet quarterly or monthly, but it requires notice to the public, of course, but it's just the county auditor is all that's needed there for that. Unless somebody has requested to be notified, then of course you have to let them know personally with a letter probably or an email. And of course, you know, email is fair, but there again, you know, if you're doing that, that email is part of your record. So you probably should be doing that on a township computer. And here's the requirement here. 44 is the open record section, okay, meeting section. Notice must be filed, and you'll notice the county auditor or designee of the county for all other bodies. And so we're on all other bodies. So that's where the requirement to notify the county auditor lies, in that 4404-20 sub 4. And there again, file with the county auditor, or if you have an individual requesting, okay. But always ask yourself this question: does the public know about this meeting, and could they find us? So when you get together and you're out on the road and you said you can, you know, all of a sudden you found each other, you're hey, let's go look at this quickly, and Does the public know about this? Well, no, I didn't even know about this till just now. Well, okay. Public doesn't know about, there's no way they could find us, you know, and so that's probably what's going to trigger an illegal meeting issue. So always ask yourself this question, is there some way that they could find it? Now, of course, when we're putting stuff in the county, at the county auditor's office, well, who's going to check there? Doesn't matter. They could if they chose to. Okay, they could. So if I want to find out when Floyd's meeting is going to be, his township's going to be, I should be able to contact the Williams County auditor and ask, when is Floyd's township meeting? It's my job to do that. They don't have to help me find it, but it's my duty to do the due diligence to find out where these meetings are at. As long as it's housed at a pub, the notice is someplace where I can find it, then it's that's all that's required. So that was that was partly of my from the last fall when we walked through that. So that's about all I got. So I don't know if did Larry take off? There he is. Okay, so
on the meetings there, if you have more than just the regular ones, so we're doing them every 2 months. Can we just take an ad out for the 2 weeks, twice in the paper for the whole year, or do we have to still notify the paper every time before a meeting?
What meeting are you talking about?
We're going to have our supervisors meetings.
You don't need newspaper notice for supervisor meetings.
Well, so if we turn around and open it up to the how would the public?
The public is always there, can always be there. Okay. And so you don't, so it's the public's job to find out when you're meeting. That's why we go, it's the public's job to check with the county auditor. If they choose not to do that, tough luck. Okay. You've done your job. You've put the notice out there at the public place, the county auditor's place. It's up to them to know about that, to find it. If they don't do that, that's their problem. Okay.
Okay.
But now with the annual meeting of the residents, that requires the newspaper notice. Okay, that's the one meeting that requires. There's some other meetings too, but that's the meeting that we're talking about. It requires a newspaper notice. That's the one that requires that 10-day notice. Now, if the person doesn't get that paper, that's his problem, not yours. You put it out there like you're supposed to, and it's up to them to find it. That's why I always say, is if I'm an absentee landowner living in Minneapolis, for example, I probably would want to subscribe to the local newspaper because that's where you're putting a notice about my land, and so that might have some bearing on my land in your township. Or I might, if I'm smart, I'll say, hey, I'll write you and say, anytime you have a meeting, send a letter to me because I can request personal notice too. But I have to request that. Okay, so the supervisor meetings do not require newspaper notice, and it's up to the individual member of the public to find it. But if you don't put the notice to the county auditor, there's no way they can find out about it. If that answers the question or not. So.
But now,
thank you.
No, but one more thought about that. That's why I'm saying if you, as a supervisor, if you're going to meet once a month, say you're going to meet the third Wednesday of the month, okay, or whatever, the fourth, I don't care what it is. One letter to the county auditor. Here's our whole year's worth of meetings. It's going to be the third Wednesday or the fourth, whatever the day you pick it. There it is. There's your notice. You're done. You're done with worrying about notice because your monthly meetings have already been out there for the public to find out about, whether they show up or not.
Now the township can notify the public by newspaper of their newspaper or of their board meetings.
Sure.
Don't have to, but you definitely can do it if you do want. You might want some input from the public once in a while at your meetings. If you got big things going on, it might be handy to have people there to express their view. They don't have a vote, but they sure can come and talk.
Never bad, never wrong to put it in the paper. It's never wrong to do that. It's
right.
But
just don't have to.
Don't have to, not required to, yeah. Zoning meetings might be different now. Zoning meetings might require paper notification depending upon what your own zoning ordinance says, because that's governed by your own ordinance. Nothing in state law about how zoning meetings are supposed to be notified. That's just public notice. And your own zoning ordinance might say, well, we need 15-day notice in our township. Then you got to follow your own rules. So, but there again, a zoning meeting is a different meeting than a supervisor meeting. It's the same guys, it's the same people, but they're doing different things. And so it's two separate meetings, two separate set of minutes.
You brought up zoning, and that's a little late to talk about this topic, but we've had a lot of interest in wind development in our area. And our township is zoned agricultural. That's the only zoning. And these guys think that we're going to give them a special use permit for their 60-year project. Is that appropriate, or do we have to change our zoning rules?
Yes. Yes and yes. You know, because if you're going to do something different than what the zone calls for, the zone calls for agricultural use, and of course, a wind tower is not agricultural, so it's different. So then that's when we talk about a special use or a conditional use permit or something like that. So we're going to do something different than what the zone calls for. And you either can permit it, you know, with a special use or conditional use, or you change your district. You change and you have a wind tower district in your township. The analogy to that would be, you know, we're gonna have a subdivision get built. We're gonna have 15 houses get built out in the country. Well, now that's no longer agricultural. Now it's obviously residential. So you either got to say, okay, it's an agricultural land, but we're going to give you a special permit to build a house. Or how about if we change that strip of land into a residential area in our zoning, and now we're a residential zone. It's no longer agricultural. So both answers are correct. Yeah. And with wind towers, you know, we've got some wind towers out there, and different places have established some wind zoning ordinances, and so plagiarism is alive and well in zoning. You can go look at some of those other townships and see what they've done, and you can adopt, you know, take a look at some of their language and determine whether that's going to work in your area or not. But if you're going to have some wind development, you know, and it is coming, then you may want to consider maybe a wind zoning district or something like that. Otherwise you're gonna have to do a building permit for every one. So, which is fine too, but.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, are there any other questions out there?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, this is Mike Kelly. I have one question. Last summer, spring, we were putting in a Texas road crossing on a minimum maintenance road, and all three of us met there, the township supervisors, and we took minutes on a piece of paper and made a decision about this Texas road crossing. Is that legal? We didn't post it in the paper. We're all three of us are farmers, and we met on the Prairie Road, minimum maintenance, and made a decision. And we took minutes and turned them in. Is that
I'm glad
really?
I'm glad you took minutes. You know, that's correct. That's correct. You wouldn't have needed a newspaper notice because it was a meeting of the supervisors, but it was definitely a meeting. Definitely
Right.
was a meeting. So your notice is lacking.
Right.
But the fact that you took minutes, I mean, that's 50% of the battle won right there. And so they end up in the clerk's hands, and so you've got a lasting record of that. And so I have to applaud you for that. But the notice is the problem. And of course, there again, you know, chances are, hey, let's get together and go look at that, you know. And so that's where the problem arises. You know, should we have waited a day or two and put out notice to do that? And technically, that's the answer. Now, let me ask you one, was it in your mind some sort of emergency situation, or was it something that could have waited?
Well, it was a fine line.
Hmm.
There's a farmer that needed access to get to his quarter that was down the minimum maintenance road. And we had, an issue there at the crossing.
But
And
was it an emergency type of thing? It had to happen today, or could you have waited it a couple days?
we could have waited a couple days.
Because that's how
probably.
somebody's going to look at that. Because if it's an emergency situation under a law, you don't need notice for an emergency situation. Okay.
And it was
You
not an
gotta wash out,
emergency.
and you gotta wash out, and you got to
Yep.
get out there and that kind of thing. But so an emergency
Yep.
situation don't need notice, but other than that, you would need notice. And so, and that's a hard thing to do. But the technical answer is we probably, today is Tuesday. We better notify the county auditor tomorrow morning that we're going to meet on Thursday afternoon.
Okay.
And there's some notice. There's your notice requirement, and you took minutes, and so. Uh, uh, so that's probably would be the tech. You got to ask yourself a question: do we really need to get out there today? And that's the hard part about this, because typically,
Right.
well, let's go do it. But
Yep.
that's why there again, if if something can wait. And I get it. The landowner, the farmer, he's hot to get out there. I get that, but hey, it rained you're not going combining tomorrow because it rained 3 inches last night. You're not going. Okay. It's okay. So you can hold off here. And so that's why sometimes that monthly meeting, can we wait till our regular monthly meeting? And that's going to happen to be next week. Can we just do it next week when we already got our meeting set? That's, if you can do it that way, then you got your notice issue. You're okay. And, the law says that the supervisors are supposed to give reasonable notice.
Right.
And that's purposely vague, that's purposely vague. And so, what's reasonable? Well, day or two, probably, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, tough. Those are tough things. That's a tough, and that every township has to deal with that.
Well, the usual measure of what is reasonable is the same time you notify the rest of the board that you're going to have a meeting, you send an email to the county auditor. The same notice as you give your board members is reasonable. And the fact that they
Is that
took minutes,
though? Mm-hmm.
that they took minutes of this meeting, they've gone a long ways to deal with if somebody did complain about them and it went to the Attorney General. One of the things the Attorney General is going to demand is minutes. So if you've got minutes to send in, that's most of the battle right there.
Yep. I always, kind of a benchmark for me is are we going to spend money? If we're going to spend some money, then we better have some minutes. And if we're going to spend some money, we better be able to have some notice. Nobody's going to show up. That's not the point. But by having notice, though, that one guy that can gripe,
Yeah.
well, I didn't know. Well, hey, we notified the county auditor. If you didn't check there, that's your problem, not ours. So there's your answer. So if we're going to spend some money, then make sure you have notice and some minutes. I mean, having minutes that's gold. That's gold.
Okay. Any other questions out there?
Yeah,
I
I'd like to
know,
ask Mr. Moe a question. I'll try to make it quick. We have a township divide line or a section line between our township and the neighboring township. And there's a farmer, of course, he's in the next township, but he's wanting us to come and clean all the rocks out of the section line. But it's not improved. It's never been improved. It's not even a two-wheel track. And so, I don't know if our duty is, if we have to go and clean that up. And like I said, our cost is only on our 33 feet. The neighboring township should bear some
I was gonna,
burden on that as well.
and that was that was gonna be my first question is how do you handle the border, section lines? Every township's got 24 miles of border, you know, so we got 1,300 townships, we got 1,300 different arrangements out there. So how does your township handle that mile? Sounds to me like you go halvesies, apparently is what you do. Is that how you do it?
We've never had to deal with this with
Okay,
that
well,
township before.
then you better get a policy in place. It's because you've got 6 miles with that township, okay, with your neighboring township. Of those 6 miles, are they, you know, as an example, are they all grass trails? Are they all gravelled? Are they all asphalted? Are they all interstate highway? What are they? You know, what are those 6 miles? And so if you don't do much maintenance on them, you know, then fine. But there is responsibility there. You have to figure out how we're going to divide the responsibility. Maybe you take the first 3 miles, we'll take the next 3 miles. Maybe we'll take every other mile. Maybe we'll do it that way. Or maybe we'll work on our side of the road, you work on your side of the section line. Maybe
down on the south side.
maybe we'll do the work, and we'll split the bill. You know, there's all kinds of different ways to do that. So um, this one here, if you don't have a policy, then you better talk to that neighboring township and say, what are we going to do here with this? Okay, because it's a shared road. And then as far as the work itself, you know, when we're talking about rocks, are we talking you know, table size boulders, or what are we talking about? You know,
No, these are very small, and a lot of it, according to the farmer that's complaining, they were put there along the fence in the 70s. And now he's trying to get the townships to pay to have these removed.
Yeah, well, you know, if it, you know, your job as township road overseers is to take care of known hazards. Okay, and Supreme Court has said you're responsible for known hazards on unimproved section lines. Okay, I'm assuming this is an unimproved section line. Obviously, if you have a road there, you know, built up gravel road, your responsibility gets higher, you know, for that kind of, your priority's higher. But if it's an unimproved section line, it's available to the public to travel, but it's a known hazard. Then the question is a rock the size of an apple, is that a hazard? Is a rock the size of a kitchen table a hazard? You know, one of them obviously is, one of them isn't. So you have to make that decision. And so and it's probably not, you know, is it capable of vehicular traffic or not?
No, it is not.
So if it's not capable of vehicular traffic, then your responsibility got lower and lower and lower. But still, you got to deal with, no, because you know people will try to use it, snowmobiles, four-wheelers, that kind of thing. You know, so if they choose to. You mentioned a fence. Is there a fence on either side?
There's a fence on one side, which we've told him he has to stay 33 feet off center. But then on the farm side, that guy he's farming right to the center line.
Okay, but there's no fence over there.
Right.
Yeah, well, you know, and you're right. If, you know, a fence has to be at the 33 foot or long, or you can let the fence be closer, but it's got to be done with your permission, and that permission would be very minimally granted. Because typically you want to keep that open for the public to use, because that's what it's there for. And if he's farming all up to the side, then you know, that's okay too. But by the same token, you know, if you don't, you can stop him from farming it too, because he's farming the right of way. And so nothing wrong with farming the right of way as long as I have permission to do so, and that permission can be denied in a future time. So yeah, when you have the border, and just compounding the problem, it's a borderline. So then you got to deal with that border township as to what are we going to do here, and you need to come up with a policy, and it might be such that we choose to do no maintenance on this, we choose to do nothing with this, but at least we can define who's got jurisdiction on either side, and then you just got to make a decision. Are these rocks a known hazard? If they're really a hazard, if you determine they're not, then end the story. Don't have to do anything.
Right, and if you travel far enough down this path, it's actually completely closed by fence and sloughs. The terrain is untravel. You can't travel it, you know.
Yeah, but the imaginary line keeps going, of course. You know, the
Yes,
imaginary
yep.
line and the 66 feet is still there. So, but yeah, so it sounds to me like it's an unimproved section line, and you just have to deal with quote unquote known hazards, and you can probably determine as a township board that those rocks are not a hazard because it's
Okay.
not gonna be traveled anyway, and he's not gonna like it. And he'll fuss and he'll stew, but that's your finding, and you'd want to do that at a meeting, and in fact, I'd even invite him to the meeting and let him gripe and complain. But your finding is that it's not travelable, and we have no responsibility to move small rocks. We'd have a responsibility to move the table size ones though, maybe.
Right.
You know, because in theory, a kid on a 4-wheeler could run into it in a foggy night, you know, so there is your known hazard. But the very first thing you do is come up with the arrangement with the adjacent township and just have a meeting with those guys and say, what's our deal with the 6 miles here? My guess is on the other side of the township, because like every township's got 24 miles, 6, 6, 6, and 6. I mean, you probably have a policy over there, don't you, with the other adjacent township, or don't you? On maintenance?
It's pretty much kind of word of mouth. They take care of the north 3 miles and we take care of the south 3 miles.
Get that in writing. Get
Okay.
that in your minutes and make sure that get that in writing. So the guy that comes after you, here's the deal. Here's the deal. Okay. And so chances are there was whoever was there on the township board before you had to deal with the one we're talking about, but it never got written down. So now you guys can't find out what it says. So put those arrangements in writing in your minutes. So
Okay. We'll put that on the list. Thank you.
yeah, you bet.
Of course, if you are going to open that road, then it would be the responsibility of the adjacent landowner to get those rocks out of there. Okay, any other questions out there?
I have a quick question regarding meetings outside of the regular supervisor meetings. I know you guys touched on it a little bit or quite a bit. I may have missed a little bit, but if the board needs to have a meeting in reference to we're out in Missouri Ridge and say an oil company comes to us with some questions or they're wanting a special use permit, do we have to do the 10-day notice for that, or is it that reasonable time?
Well, if you're looking for a special use permit, that's a zoning question, right?
Yes.
The answer is that would require a zoning meeting, not a supervisor, not a board meeting, a zoning board meeting. And what does your zoning ordinance say about your notice for zoning meetings? That's a rhetorical question. I mean, that's what you have to, that's what's going to govern the answer to that question. Because there's nothing in state law about notice of what's required for notice of zoning meetings, because that's local. 1,300 townships in theory, 1,300 different zoning ordinances, 1,300 different notice requirements, because zoning is local control. And so that requires a zoning board decision, which is the 3 supervisors, but they take their supervisor hat off and they put their zoning hat on, and it's a separate set of minutes, it's a separate meeting, and it's a separate set of duties, and those duties are governed by your own zoning ordinance, whatever that says.
So to clarify, because I'm fairly new at this still.
Yep. That's why you're here, by the way. So thanks for
yes,
being here.
is to learn. So when we have our regular monthly meetings and we're discussing the roads and say this oil company wants a special use permit due to, the weight and the amount of time they come, et cetera, just to make it easier for them. Is that able to be discussed at the regular meetings?
No, I might have misspoke. So you're talking about a special permit for weight.
Yes, sorry.
You said special use, and so I immediately went to my zoning.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So So take back what I just said the last minute and a half, because I misunderstood you. Because when you're talking about special use, that's a zoning term. So special weight deal, okay, that's a road thing, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so then that would be the road supervisors would do, acting as supervision of the roads. And so then, what does your, you have a monthly meeting, and so for you to have a meeting in between that monthly meeting, you'd have to have notice, and that's a reasonable notice, and so that would be, 1 or 2 days hence, but but there again, they think they have to have that decision today, but they're not going to get it today, that's what you got to be a little tough around and just say, hey, we don't meet every day, I know, unless, that particular thing, unless you have some sort of an in-house policy on weight limits and maybe you authorize one person to deal with that, I don't know that. You guys from out west, are you familiar with that?
If the county participates in the load pass system, then that helps a lot.
Yeah, because then they can go through that system. Yeah. So yeah. And I don't know, do some townships out there, do you designate a road overseer, one supervisor? Because by the way, you can designate, any township, you can designate one of the supervisors to be a road overseer. So that's the one person that deals with road issues. So maybe in those western townships, you can have that road overseer supervisor that's given that duty. Maybe that one person can deal with this issue on a on-call basis. Maybe that'd be a local policy that you'd have to adopt, but I suppose you could do it that way.
That would make sense. And we do, because Missouri Ridge is a pretty decent sized township. So we have the guys, just because there's so much traffic with the oil, is go check this area every once in a while, go check this area. So everybody kind of has their role within what roads they got to watch.
And so maybe you'd have one of the supervisors designated as road overseer, and that's the one person that deals with those permitting situations, and you authorize that one person to give the permits out one-on-one. It doesn't have to have a meeting of the rest of the board because you've authorized that person to do that. Maybe you could do it that way.
Yep, that makes sense. And then I had another question. When you guys had brought up the bond for the treasurer, so the treasurer would only need to be the one that's bonded because they're the ones with the money, essentially, correct?
The clerk, treasurer, and assessor, if you have one, are required by law to be bonded.
Okay, so if the clerk and treasurer are separate, does the clerk still need to be bonded?
Yes.
Okay.
Anybody that handles money, funds.
But the law specifically says clerk, treasurer, and assessor.
Okay, that makes sense. And then what was the other one I had? Because we have so I'm the clerk, but then we also have a treasurer. So we're just trying to figure out the balance of, since they're two separate roles within our township, for the accountability and kind of where the roles all lie within.
Well, if you look at those two sections, the treasurer's duties and the clerk's duties, and kind of maybe put them side by side, and you kind of see what, clerk does this, the treasurer does this, but in theory, both handle funds, have capable of handling the funds, thus the need for the bond, but and maybe you should need to take a look at, unless this law gets changed. You can take a look at some outside bonding sources, maybe, and maybe have to pay some extra for it, but that might be a possibility there, because it seems like you western townships, with the oil activity, you end up with more funds available than those of us out east, but.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then when you guys were discussing the checks of the clerk and the chairman, so in our township, our chairman also does the road maintenance. He's done a bid, etc., stuff like that. we haven't had him sign checks that go to his business because we don't want it to look like a conflict of interest. Is that correct, even despite the Century Code?
Well, there, I suppose, you know, there again on the minutes, you would say, yeah, the chair, there's a side question I'm going to ask you here, but you know, the chair abstains from this vote on this because of the conflict of interest, and we've designated one of the other supervisors to approve that, you know, his billing, you know, so the minutes kind of cover what you're going to do, you know, so. But that to me would be the way to do that. And in other words, you were explaining why the chairman doesn't sign that check because he has a conflict of interest, you know, and you've
Okay, so just have it recorded in the minutes.
and you've authorized somebody else to take his place, a designee. The bigger question is, though, you're saying he's doing contracting for the township. You're saying, right?
Yeah, well, yes, he does the blading and snow removal.
Okay. And so, you know, there is a section of the law which says that the township officer cannot do any work for the township, contract work, unless, you know, unless there's nobody else willing to do it. You know, so so if there's another contractor out there that would do that, and then your supervisor is not supposed to. But then you get into that competitive bid situation, so he's the low bid, you know, so I understand that too, but if you have to do it that way, all activities that deal with that supervisor doing the work all have to show that he's abstained from all that discussion, takes no part in the debate, takes no part in payment or any of that stuff, you know, and so that means the other two supervisors gotta step it up here, because that person can have nothing to do with any discussion on this, you know, so
and when
that's why they, you know, technically even get another contractor to do the work.
Yeah, and when it's come to anything to do with paying the invoices, when it came to sealed bids, he abstained from everything so that it was neutral.
And do the minutes reflect that he abstained?
Well, before I was clerk, I would have to look at them.
I mean,
don't know. It should,
you know, every set of minutes should state that, you know, that Joe or Frank, whatever his name, abstained from all discussion on this topic because he has a conflict of interest. And every minutes, every time that comes up, it should always be in the minutes.
Okay. Yep. I'll make sure and double check all that stuff. And he also, I mean, I don't know if this makes any difference, is when he does. So it's his company, but if he comes out and does any of the work, he doesn't charge for his hours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's, you know, that's you know, that's up to you, I guess, you know, how you do that, but of course his supervisor pay is different than the contractor side too. So yeah.
Yes. Yep. Completely separate. No, I will be sure. I want to address all these things at our meetings so that we can
just make sure your minutes are documented so that they're, again, an outside auditor looking at this can figure out what you're doing.
Yep.
Without having to go to somebody and say, what did you mean by this? You know, I want to be able to read it. I want to be able to see it in the minutes.
Okay. Yes, I will start to make sure that everything is done in that manner.
Isn't it fun to be the clerk?
Oh, so much fun some days. Well, but I mean, this is how I got to learn and figure it out.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, the statute for that is 58-05-12. Officers interested in contracts of township. And that can be found on page 185 of the handbook.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate it so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question. Any more questions out there?
Yeah, Larry, this is Joel Hammer from Allendale Township. Just wondering about bylaws for townships. Where are they? What are they? And where can I find them? as any townships have bylaws. And it's not on page 30 in the book. That's the bylaws for the North Dakota Township Officers Association. But I'm wondering about bylaws for a township.
Well, that's in 58-03.
And do all
58
townships have bylaws, or some don't, or how long have they been in effect?
Well, the establishment of bylaws is in 58-03 dash 10 township bylaws establishing it's much like the zoning ordinance. They're not effective until they've been published. That's the main thing about them.
The bylaws would be rules and policies specific to your township. You know, as an example, we just got done talking about with the Boundary Township there with I lost his name there, but you know, so we take the first 3 miles and you take the next 3 miles. That would be a bylaw. That'd be a policy that you'd have in writing. Something that you follow from year to year. That'd be an example of a bylaw. We're going to have a township dumpster, and it's going to be it's going to be sitting at the site of the old schoolhouse, and only township residents can use it. That would be a local rule. That's a bylaw. Okay. You can think about all kinds of local things that you do that probably should be in writing, that you want people within your township to follow, and those would be your bylaws. And then, of course, any zoning ordinances by definition are local, and those would all be that would be technically bylaws, you know, but there's a specific kind of bylaw, they're zoning. We only pay for one approach per quarter. Some townships have that rule. There's a bylaw. We want, if you put in approach, you pay for the culvert and the township will pay for the dirt work. There's a bylaw. That's a local thing that we do in our townships. So go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, a bylaw is not effective until it has been published in the official newspaper.
So there again, so the public can see it. Yeah.
Right.
It might have been
That could be
published.
anything like our township doesn't allow orange houses. You gotta publish in the paper before it's effective.
And it might have been published 30 years ago, but there it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then do I have to prove that it was published 30 years ago?
The clerk should have recorded when it was published.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Well, that's there again. That was our very first question about what documents and records do you throw after 10 years? That one was not on the list. You know.
I get it, but
yeah, I mean, you know, and that rule, by the way, that rule about throwing stuff after 10 years, that's been in the law since forever. You know, so that's what happens. You know, we and in our defense, we've talked about this before. In our defense, you know, we don't have a courthouse. Townships don't have a courthouse where they get to store stuff. You know, we don't have a staff of 5 people that file stuff for us. Our clerk's records are the shoebox on top of the refrigerator. A lot of times that's where they're at, you know, and they get passed along, or they're in the garage, and we got a big old file cabinet someplace that somebody forgot where the heck it's at. I mean, that's the problem, you know. But you know, hopefully going forward, we're going to be better stewards of records and do a better job of hanging on to this stuff and making copies and keeping this stuff. But yeah, to try to go back 30, 40, 70, 90 years to find stuff, it's tough, because in theory, it all should be there.
Yeah, they weren't entered into a computer database where they're easy to find.
Mhm.
It's in there. It might be what that mouse used to make a nest over in the corner with. And
The different kind of a mouse, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Okay, anything more? We're running a
like-
little long on it tonight, but
Looks like El
maybe-
Presidente wants to say something.
Just want to thank everyone for attending tonight, and then remind everyone that the annual meeting this year will be in Bismarck, and it will be December 8th and 9th. So mark your calendars for that. Good to see some new faces out there for that annual meeting. And a big thank you to Tom and Larry. You guys do a really nice job on this. So
Next Township Tuesday will be when?
second Tuesday of, let's see, May 13th. May 13th.
May 13th. And the link for the meeting is on the NDTUA calendar on the website. So just go to that day and click on Township Tuesday, and you should be able to find the link there.
And this tonight was recorded, as they all are. So if you know some buddies out there that are new to this game and missed tonight, they could go find this, right, Larry, and they could watch the video of this. Right,
Yes, it'll take me a little time to get. I gotta cut off a bunch of dead air on the beginning of the thing and stuff like that. So in a few days it'll be on the website, a YouTube video. So again, any last questions before we close it down? I know we barely scratched the surface. It's a big topic to discuss. How to run a meeting, how to run these meetings, and the duties of the officers. And there's angles to a lot of this that we can't predict. The best we can do is try to give you a response when you ask your questions. So your questions are very important in this game. So
okay, I'm done.
you okay?
Yeah.
Well, if there's no more questions, at one time we had I think about 64 people online.
Good.
So it's one of our biggest turnouts, and we'll look at doing some more work on this in a month. So with that, we'll say good night and thank you for joining us. I hope you found some value here, and we'll keep on trying.